So when we're developing emotional, or we want to develop emotional intelligence, the starting point really is to identify your typical actions in each of the key component areas and assess your level a little bit more in depth than we just did there. We use an assessment on that, but the areas which you rarely draw upon or have lower competency levels in, these would then be your potential kind of development opportunities if you were wanting to increase your overall level of emotional intelligence. On the next slide, I'll kind of share with you a few of the skills that you might like to use as your kind of starting point. But as well as practicing the skills that you would like to develop, it's also helpful to focus on how other people respond to you. Actually actively ask for feedback about your behavior, how other people perceive your actions, perceive your behaviors, and also really importantly, how do you leave them feeling at the end of that interaction? And that can provide a really useful source of information that you can then use to improve your performance and further develop your emotional intelligence. Just think about each one of the color preferences. And I'm just going to give you a couple of kind of starting points for each one of these preferences. So if we start with the red, for example, now some of the kind of development kind of challenges, areas could be for a red, could be self-awareness. It's around the empathy, that tolerance that I mentioned a minute ago, perhaps even flexibility to a degree, regulation, their well-being. So just a couple of kind of starting points there is Reds can learn to use language that promotes constructive feedback, perhaps not quite as blunt and direct as their natural style usually is. So it's looking at taking into account the kind of how can they support the emotions and the reactions of other people. Another area is being more attentive to the needs of other people. You know, pay more actual attention to them when you're talking to them. Really listen to them, make eye contact, demonstrate that interest in what they're saying, in them as an individual. So if we think about yellow preference then, well, for yellow preferences, it's around kind of, again, empathy, achievement, tolerance perhaps, regulation, perhaps well-being, are all kind of possible areas that they may like to develop a little bit further. So here, what can we do? Well, it's about differentiating between when it's appropriate to focus on all that big picture, all those ideas, that innovation, tell those stories, and when in actual fact, it is far more appropriate for the situation, for the people, to focus on the detail, to give more factual data. Another thing for the yellow preference is to actually, rather than, they can, because they are full of ideas and they just keep coming up with idea after idea, they really are the ideas people. But if constantly putting these ideas out to people, it can be quite overwhelming for people. So perhaps an area for them to focus on is, before they just throw out all these ideas at people and overwhelm people, is to think them through a little bit more and kind of try and sort them and prioritize the ideas and information. What are their key ideas that they want to get out there? And kind of more of a drip kind of effect feed, rather than throwing everything out there in a downpour altogether. If we then focus on our green development area, there, you know, it's around that kind of flexibility, the achievement, the energy, the persuasiveness, their ability to lead. So here, again, a couple of starting points is learning to become more emotionally detached, be more objective in their evaluation of a situation, be more focused on the kind of the task, the achievement of the task. And it's also being able to differentiate between when it's an appropriate time for empathy and when in actual fact somebody could do with a little bit of constructive feedback. And that would be a far more supportive and helpful kind of approach rather than the empathy. And last but not least, our blue preference. So for blues, it's all about that kind of that flexibility, the empathy again, the social skills, the tolerance, their ability to lead. And for them, a couple of development starting points here would be identifying feelings and emotions as actually useful pieces of information. Blues like detail, they like information, they like to be in the know, have the knowledge. So emotions and kind of feelings are not perceived naturally as kind of hard factual data, very subjective. And it's perhaps revisiting the way that we think about feelings and emotions and actually seeing the value of having that inside kind of knowledge about people's feelings and emotions and their own feelings and emotions. It's also about opening up to different perspectives and being able to value those differences of opinions, different ways of doing things, different ideas. Another great development area, perhaps for a blue. Any learning, it doesn't just happen overnight. It takes practice and it takes time. One thing I always say to people is, it really is worth remembering that people who have those higher levels of emotional intelligence in general lead happier, healthier, and more enjoyable, successful lives. They build stronger relationships, both at home and at work. And they just enjoy kind of greater satisfaction and just enjoy life to its full. And that for me is kind of the what's in it for me. Why should I bother to invest my time, my energy into developing a higher level of emotional intelligence?